I have lived over 60 years, endured brutal battlefields, witnessed countless schemes and betrayals, but never thought the person trying to take my life would be my own daughter. That evening, the kitchen was bathed in warm yellow light, the aroma of chicken soup wafting from the bubbling pot. Teresa, my daughter, quietly bent down and scooped out 2 bowls. I sat at the table, eyes fixed on her, and then I saw it. Her hand trembled slightly as she pulled a small glass vial from her pocket. With just a tilt, a layer of white powder fell into the bowl of soup on the left, quickly dissolving in the boiling liquid. She thought I didn't see. But 30 years in the military sharpened my eyes to catch every detail. I sat still, my heart pounding fiercely in my chest. My daughter, the little girl who used to crawl into my arms during storms, was now silently sprinkling something into her father's food. Teresa turned around and forced a smile. "Soup's ready." "Dad." She placed the bowl right where I had always sat. I nodded slightly, then waited for her to go back to the cupboard for bread. In just 10 seconds, I swapped the 2 bowls of soup. The movement was precise, swift, leaving no trace. When she returned, I stayed perfectly still, as if I hadn't moved. She set the bread on the table, pulled out a chair, and unconsciously pushed the remaining bowl toward herself. I watched my daughter bring the spoon to her mouth. The steam blurred her glasses. If that powder was truly poison, Teresa was swallowing the trap she had set for her own father. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment right now. Your opinion is not just a word. It's a way of sharing the pain of a father like me. How can a father face it when his own blood wants to poison him? The spoon touched her lips lightly, but I heard it clearer than the ticking of a clock in the hallway. 1 spoonful, then 2. I sat motionless, forcing a gentle fatherly smile, while inside my chest raged a violent storm. I recalled the pain earlier, when the stabbing cramps forced me to kneel on the cold tile floor. It wasn't imagination. I knew that pain was not normal. Yet now, the very daughter I once protected with all my heart is eating the very thing she put there to harm me. "Dad, why aren't you eating?" Teresa looked up, her eyes probing, trying to sound casual. I just smiled, gently stirring the spoon in the bowl. "Let it cool a bit. Makes it easier to eat." In that moment, I saw 2 images intertwined. Little Teresa sitting on my lap years ago, hugging her teddy bear, and the 28-year-old woman in front of me, hiding a dark scheme from her father. As she kept eating, I noticed fine beads of sweat forming at her temples. I tried to stay calm, but inside I was flooded with one question. What turned my daughter into this? After dinner, Teresa used the excuse of cleaning up, leaving me alone. I heard the clatter of dishes, the rush of running water. The once silent house suddenly felt strange and distant. I stood up, my steps heavy as I climbed upstairs. In the mirror, my face looked older and more worn out than ever before. In the bedroom, I took Margaret's photo, my wife's, and held it in my palm. Her gentle smile seemed to say, "You have to be strong. Don't lose her again." I remember clearly the day Teresa left home, only 18 years old. She slammed the door, loaded her stuff into the car without a word of goodbye. I could only stand silently by the window, watching the dust swirl behind the wheels. For 10 years, only a few postcards and brief phone calls. I thought I had lost her forever. Then, a month ago, she came back, carrying 2 suitcases, eyes sunken, saying she just needed a place to stay. I opened the door, believing we could heal. And now the child I longed for is planning to kill me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went through the house, checked all the locks, inspected every drawer. The military habits I thought were buried suddenly came alive again. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and began writing every detail. 8:15. Saw Teresa pour white powder into the soup. 8:17. I switched the bowls. 8:20. Teresa ate the soup, showed slight sweating. That record was both a habit and a reminder. I'm not crazy. Everything is real. Around midnight, I heard noises downstairs in the kitchen. Coming downstairs, I saw Teresa crouching in front of the fridge, hurriedly putting a small bottle into her purse. When she noticed me standing there, she forced a smile. "I'm just getting some water. Dad." I said nothing, just stared hard enough for her to look away. The next morning, as the first sunlight slipped through the curtains, Teresa appeared with a pale face, holding her stomach. "Dad, I think I ate something bad. I was sick all night." I sat down at the table, calmly brewing coffee. "Is that so? Then it must have been the soup." Her eyes widened. Her face briefly changed color, then quickly masked it. "Dad, what are you saying?" I put down the coffee cup and looked her straight in the eyes. I swapped the bowl. "Teresa." She backed away, trembling, then started crying. I didn't mean to kill you. I just wanted you to get weak, to be hospitalized. I need the money. You have insurance, a house, assets? I owe too many people. I'm desperate." I felt a chill run through me. Not from fear, but from the heartbreak of a father's shattered soul. My only daughter sees my life as a number, a contract, an insurance policy. I stood up, pointing toward the door. "Get out, right now." "Dad, please, get lost." My voice was no longer a gentle father's, but that of an officer from long ago. Teresa burst into tears, rushed up the stairs, and packed her things. Just 10 minutes later, the sound of the car door slamming echoed outside. The house fell silent once again. I sat down, burying my face in my hands. Last night, I tried to hold on to hope maybe she was just mistaken, just reckless, but her confession just wiped away all illusions. Teresa is no longer the child who once sat in my lap. She has become a stranger. I looked around the house, the wedding photo, certificates, memories piled up, and realized this was the breaking point. From this moment on, our father-daughter relationship could never be whole again. The house returned to its familiar silence, but this time it was no longer peaceful. It felt like a deep cut that kept bleeding endlessly. I sat in the living room long after Teresa left, the morning sunlight filtering through the curtains, shining on the family photos hanging on the wall. There was still Margaret's bright smile, her hand resting on Teresa's shoulder when she was little, eagerly biting into a birthday cake. Now, looking back, those photos seem like the remnants of a family that no longer exists. I wonder, when did the father-son relationship start to fall apart like this? Was it from the day Margaret passed, when I suddenly became a strict, rigid man who only knew how to give orders? Or was it when Teresa entered her rebellious phase, wanting to break free while I kept trying to hold her back? Memories rushed in like a storm. I still remember when she was 16 wearing a short red dress, heavily lined eyes, standing across from me in the living room. "You never trust me," she shouted. "You treat me like a prisoner." I shouted back, "As long as you're under this roof, you have to obey." The next day, she left, leaving the house empty, and I told myself, she'll come back when she's old enough to understand. But 10 years passed, with only a few fragments left, birthday cards with indifferent signatures, a few rushed phone calls. I got used to living alone, letting the emptiness in my heart gather dust over the years. Then, 1 month ago, she came back. I clearly remember that afternoon. It was drizzling, my door swung open, and Teresa walked in, dragging 2 suitcases soaked with rain. She didn't look me in the eye, just whispered, "I just need a place to stay." "Dad?" I was so shaken I nearly dropped my teacup. In that moment, I felt like I was given a second chance to start over, to heal. But from the very beginning, something was off. She was in the house, but not truly present. During the day, Teresa often disappeared for hours without saying where she was going. At night, I heard her whispering on the phone in her room, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. Once, I accidentally caught a few broken words. "Soon. He's old. Insurance." My heart skipped a beat, but I quickly pushed it aside. I didn't want to believe it. Then she started showing unusual interest in money. Every dinner, she found a way to bring up financial matters. "Do you still have life insurance?" Or, "How much is this house worth now?" I just smiled it off, thinking it was a trivial curiosity. But inside, a vague worry crept in. One other evening, as I passed by the study, I saw her rummaging through the file cabinet. When I turned on the light, Teresa startled, quickly hiding a stack of papers. "I was just looking for the birth certificate," she said awkwardly. I said sharply, "What do you need it for?" She turned away without answering. I wanted to press her further, but the weak heart of a father made me quietly let it go. When the stomach pain hit me last night, all those details suddenly connected into a terrible puzzle. I realized Teresa was not just curious. She was scheming. And the fact that she secretly put that white powder into the soup proved all my suspicions were true. But what hurt me the most wasn't her scheme, but myself. Why was I so blind? Why didn't I trust my instincts from the start? I stood up and walked around the house. Each room brought back a memory. The living room with the Christmas tree from the year when the three of us were still together. The wooden stairs where Teresa once sat, crying because I forbade her from going to a birthday party. The kitchen, now the scene of the conspiracy. They all seemed like ghosts mocking me. "You lost your child a long time ago, but refused to admit it." That night, sitting alone in the armchair, I thought of Margaret. She once said, "Never let doubt be buried, because it is a voice of salvation." I didn't listen. I let love blind my eyes. The so-called first doubt had actually appeared long ago. I just didn't dare to face it. I remembered Teresa's eyes every time she asked about money, not the eyes of a child, but the eyes of someone calculating. I recalled how she avoided my questions about work, about life, as if hiding something dark behind a veil. And finally, the truth revealed itself in that bowl of soup. That night, I opened the notebook again and wrote one more line I suspected, but didn't dare to believe. That was a mistake. Sitting in the dark, I swore there would be no room for blindness from now on. If Teresa comes back, I will be ready. I will remember every detail, every sign, every word. No longer the naive father hoping, but a veteran who knows that the enemy sometimes wears the face of family. When I closed the notebook, I looked around the house. The roof I once thought was the safest place. Now, I know clearly safety disappeared, along with the sound of the spoon hitting the soup bowl last night. And that was just the beginning. The next day, the sky was gray and heavy, with misty rain like a thin curtain covering the whole neighborhood. I brewed a cup of black coffee, sitting by the window looking out at the empty yard. Last night, I wrote a lot, but this morning, when I opened the notebook, the handwriting was shaky, like my own mood. Everything happened too fast, too raw, leaving an empty, hollow space inside me. I told myself maybe she won't come back. Maybe this is where it ends. But my heart knew those who are used to scheming don't give up easily, just as I predicted. By the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I stepped out, and in front of me was Teresa. Her face was pale, eyes dark with sleeplessness, clutching her purse tightly. "Dad, let me in to talk," she said, her voice breaking. I hesitated, then stepped back, letting her in. The smell of cheap perfume mixed with cigarette smoke clung to her clothes. She stood in the living room, looking at family photos, then turned to me. "I'm sorry about the other day." I panicked. I didn't know what I was doing. I crossed my arms. Then, "What is the white powder?" "Just panic, too," Teresa bit her lip, eyes looking away. I just wanted you to be weak. They said I'd get money soon if you went to the hospital. See, I owe a lot. You wouldn't understand." I stepped closer, my tone even but cold. Who's pushing you?" She was silent. That silence said more than 1,000 words. I looked at my daughter and realized the gentle smile she once had completely disappeared. In front of me was only a strange face, with shifty eyes that gleamed with calculation. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, turned off all the lights, leaving only the small candlelight, wanting to watch, wanting to see what he would do. Around midnight, I heard a noise. Teresa's door quietly opened, and her shadow slipped down the hallway. I sat still in the dark, and my heart beating slow but heavy. She entered the kitchen, turned on a dim light, and opened the cabinet to take out a small bottle. I clearly saw her pour something else into a plastic bag, then stuff it into her wallet. In that moment, all her pretended remorse vanished. I stepped out of the shadows, my voice hoarse. "What are you planning next, Teresa?" She jumped, spun around sharply. "Ah!" For a moment, her mask fell away. Her face twisted, eyes blazing fire. No longer pretending to worry or feel guilty. "You dare spy on me," she shouted. "Dee!" "You think you're smarter than everyone. You're always controlling, always ordering. You never treated me like your daughter, only like a soldier under your command." I stood still, silent. In her eyes, I saw raw hatred, like a fire that had been smoldering for 10 years suddenly flaring up. "I don't need you anymore," she said, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as she clenched the bottle. "I'll take care of myself. Someone else takes care of me, understands me. Unlike you." Hearing that, my heart sank. Someone else takes care of you, so there's someone behind her, controlling her like a pawn. The next morning, Teresa left home with her bag. Without a word or a backward glance, I sat by the window, watching her walk down the street, disappearing into the thick rain. In that moment, I knew clearly the daughter I once raised was gone. The returned daughter mask she wore when she knocked on my door a month ago had fallen away. Instead, revealed was someone else greedy for money, full of hatred, and ready to be exploited. At noon, I called lawyer Emily Carter. "Sir," her voice calm, "Simon, you need to be straightforward. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I suspect my daughter is being manipulated to take my assets. She tried to poison me." Silence lingered on the other end for a long moment. Then Emily spoke slowly. "I'll help you review all the asset records, insurance, and wills. You need to protect yourself, starting now." I closed the phone. My heart stirred. I never thought I'd have to turn to a lawyer to protect myself from my own daughter. But the truth has been exposed, and I have nowhere left to hide. Late afternoon, I opened the closet and took out my old military uniform. The jacket was faded, medals tarnished, but when I put it on, I felt like my old self again, clear-headed, disciplined, unafraid. I stood in front of the mirror, looking straight into my own eyes. From now on, no more weakness. She has chosen her path. I will choose mine truth and justice. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sunset bled red over the porch like a stain of blood across the sky. I closed the door and stepped into the darkness, knowing the real confrontation was only beginning. That night, the house was filled with silence. Teresa had left since afternoon, but I knew this silence was not peace. It was like the calm before the battlefield erupts a stillness that makes the heart race faster. I sat in the armchair and opened my notebook. My messy handwriting filled 2 pages, white powder. Small glass bottle, half-hearted confession. Someone else behind it. I looked up at the wall clock. The hour hand moved slowly, signaling a long night ahead. I stood up, checked every door and window. Military habits returned. Bolt the locks. Test the keys. Note the time. The whole house became a fortress, where I was both the guard and the besieged. Around midnight, I turned on a small flashlight and stepped into the hallway. Old pictures still hung on the wall. One showed Teresa at 10 years old, wearing a green dress, hair tied high, her innocent smile radiant. I gently touched the glass frame, my heart aching. How did that child become someone willing to poison her own father's food? I thought of Margaret. If she were still alive, she surely would have found a way to bring Teresa back. As for me, I only knew how to give orders, be strict, then push my daughter away. Regret tore at me, but it couldn't erase the truth tonight. I had to prepare to face my own flesh and blood. Around 1 in the morning, my phone rang. A message from an unknown number. "You will pay the price. We know you live alone." I squinted at the words, a cold shiver running down my spine. We, so Teresa was no longer alone. I took a screenshot, printed a copy, and filed it as evidence. Then I carefully placed the phone next to my coffee cup, my finger never leaving the emergency call button. Time dragged on. I couldn't fall asleep. Every gust of wind outside the window, Every branch brushing against the eaves made me jump. I paced through the rooms like a cornered animal, but refused to lose control. The only discipline left was to keep notes. I recorded the time, the sounds, even my vague feelings. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop and started searching white powder that dissolves quickly, causes stomach pain, sweating, nausea. Results flooded in digitalis, digoxin heart medications, drugs that, if dosed incorrectly, cause arrhythmia and even death. I leaned back in my chair, bitterly laughing. So my daughter, or rather, whoever was behind this, had chosen this drug. This wasn't impulsive, it was a calculated plot. At 3 a.m., I heard a car outside, headlights shining through the window. I listened intently until the sound faded away. My heart was restless. When would they come back? I went to the kitchen, where 2 bowls of soup from last night were still unwashed. I touched the edge of a bowl, cold to the touch. Teresa's bowl still had some thick liquid inside. I scooped a small spoonful, put it in a plastic bag, labeled it, and placed it in the freezer. That would be evidence. At 4 a.m., my body was exhausted, but my mind was taut as a wire. I sat at the table and opened my notebook. The white page stained under the light. I wrote, "This is the longest night of my life. Not because of the war, not because of bullets and bombs, but because I lost the only thing left of my family." I slowly put down my pen. Tomorrow, I will find out who's behind Teresa. Otherwise, I will never have peace. When the first light shone through the window, I was too exhausted to stand, so I leaned back in the armchair, eyes half closed. But at that moment, the doorbell rang. I sprang up, heart pounding. Through the crack in the door, I saw a mailman hand me a thick envelope. I tore it open. Inside were a few hastily written pages with scrawled handwriting, "Don't investigate any further. Hand over the house and assets, or you will regret it. This is your last chance." I folded the paper, sighed. So, they've decided to reveal themselves. This war is no longer a suspicion, it has begun. I placed the envelope on the table and looked straight at Margaret's photo on the wall. See, we lost our daughter. But I won't lose my honor, too. Then I opened the drawer and took out an old leather notebook, the one I used throughout my military service. I wrote another line, February 14th, the longest night. The campaign begins, outside. The blazing red sun was rising, signaling a new day. But to me, it felt like the sound of a whistle starting a prolonged battle not just to survive, but to reclaim a truth long hidden. That morning, cold sunlight shone on the ransom envelope still lying on the table. I sat still, fingers touching the edge of the paper, feeling it dry and rough but burning like fire. All night I waited for the truth. And now it stood before me, someone else was behind Teresa. And this game was far from over. I decided not to call the police right away. Military experience taught me sometimes letting the enemy fully reveal themselves is the best way to defeat them. But what I didn't expect was Teresa returning earlier than anticipated. Near noon, a knock sounded at the door. I opened it, and there stood my daughter. Her face was pale, lips cracked, eyes tired. Teresa looked like she hadn't slept all night. "Dad, I need to talk," she whispered. I said nothing, just stepped back to let him in. He plopped down into the chair, hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the table. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong." I crossed my arms calmly. Wrong about what? Wrong for trying to poison your father, or wrong for revealing your true self? He hung his head, tears streaming down. "You don't understand. I had no choice. I owe a lot of money. If I didn't do it, they would kill me." I raised an eyebrow. "They? Who are they?" Teresa was silent, then shook her head. "I can't say. If you knew, you'd be in danger too." I slammed my hand on the table, the sound shaking the whole room. "Danger. You almost killed your own father. Teresa, what could be more dangerous than your own flesh and blood trying to take your lives?" He sobbed, but suddenly his eyes flashed with determination. "I only meant to weaken you, to get you hospitalized. Then they would take care of the rest. I didn't want to see it with my own eyes." That confession felt like a knife straight through my heart. So he really had been working with someone else, not just acting on impulse. I sat down, staring directly at him. What's his name? Teresa hesitated, then sighed. Hubert. He promised to help me pay off my debt, to give me a new life. I trusted him. That name hit me like a hammer. I'd never heard of him before, but just looking at Teresa's trembling eyes, I knew he was the root of all this. Where did you meet him? I asked. At a cafe. He flirted with me, saying things I'd never heard before. He told me I deserved more, that you had controlled and imposed on me my whole life. Then he started asking about your assets, saying that was the way out for both of us. Teresa's voice choked up. At first, I didn't believe him, but the debts piled up. The threatening calls came every day. I was scared. He gave me the bottle, said just a little would weaken you. Then everything would be easier. I listened. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the chair, so my suspicions turned out to be true. My daughter did not act alone. She was just a pawn in the hands of a deceiver. But that doesn't erase the crime, because she agreed to it herself. She put the white powder in her father's soup. Teresa, I opened my eyes, my voice low. Do you think apologizing is enough? Do you understand what you've done? I've prepared funerals for many comrades, but never thought I'd have to prepare one for myself because of my daughter's hands. She sobbed, leaning forward to grab my hand. Dad, I know I was wrong. I can't go back to him. He'll kill me if I betray him. Please, Dad, save me. I pulled my hand away, my eyes as steel. Save you. Have you ever thought about saving me when you poisoned my soup? She froze, then choked out. You don't understand. I'm so scared. I looked at her face, seeing a strange mix both regret and cunning, as if her confession was just another game. I've heard half-hearted words like that on the battlefield, losers begging for mercy, but their eyes still flashing with betrayal. I stood up and walked to the door, outside. I need to think. She panicked. Are you going to call the police? I turned back and stared straight at her. If I do, you'll go to jail. If I don't, Hubert will come back. Tell me, what other choice do I have? Teresa sank into the chair, covering her face and crying. I left her, stepped onto the porch, and took a deep breath. The cold wind whistled through the leaves, carrying the damp smell of last night's rain. At that moment, one thing was clear: Teresa's mask had fallen. But her confession was only half-truth. She wanted me to believe she regretted it, but she was also hiding and protecting that Hubert guy. When I turned back, she was gone, leaving only a scarf dropped on the chair. I picked it up and smelled cheap perfume. In that moment, I understood the war with Hubert, and Teresa was far from over. That half-hearted confession was just the prelude to a bigger storm. I sat down at the table, opened an old leather notebook, and wrote another line, February 15th. Teresa admitted half the truth. Hubert appeared in the shadows. The real battle is coming. Outside the window, the afternoon sunlight poured in, spreading red like blood. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. Inside me, there was only one resolve: to expose Hubert's true face. And the truth my daughter deliberately hid. Tonight would be long again, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready. That evening, I sat alone in my study, the pale yellow desk lamp shining on the file I had been compiling for days. On the table were the blackmail envelope, the scarf Teresa had forgotten, and the note I just wrote Hubert, the man behind it. I flipped through every note, every detail. The strange calls at midnight, Teresa's vague words, the white powder jar, and the times she looked at me with eyes full of fear yet determination, all pointed to one name. Close to midnight, the phone rang. An unknown number. I answered, keeping my voice calm. Mr. Brown. A man's voice sounded, smooth as if rehearsed. We need to meet. I don't know who you are, I replied, eyes fixed on the clock. Don't pretend. I'm Hubert. You've heard my name before, haven't you? Teresa told you everything. My heart pounded hard, but I held it back. If you want something, just say it. He chuckled coldly. It's simple. Sign the house transfer papers, or leave a will either way. It's your choice. We don't want to use violence. But you know, accidents happen every day. I took a deep breath and said, tomorrow, 8 p.m., Oakwood Corner Cafe. Alone. Hubert hesitated, then agreed. Don't disappoint me, old man. I hung up, my heart still pounding. Finally, the shadow behind it all showed himself. The next day passed slowly. I woke early, polished my old wristwatch, the one that had accompanied me through my military years, so it reminded me that every second counts. I packed the file bag carefully, photos of the medicine jar, printed threatening messages, and detailed notes. I wasn't just going to meet him. I was turning the meeting into a trap. Late afternoon, I stopped by lawyer Emily's office. She looked at me, her eyes full of worry. Simon, what are you planning to do? Meeting him face to face is risky. I need to look the man who turned my daughter into a tool in the eye, I replied, and I won't go empty-handed. The recorder, the button camera, everything was ready. I wanted proof. Emily nodded softly, handing me a standby power of attorney. If anything happens, I'll act immediately. That evening, Oakwood Cafe was quiet. The yellow light cast long shadows on the wooden table. I sat in a hidden corner, back against the wall, eyes watching the exit. At exactly 8 o'clock, a man walked in. Tall, thin-build, slicked back hair, black coat. His eyes were cold, but his smile was as smooth as honey. Mr. Brown, he said, sitting opposite me. A pleasure. I stared at him intently. This was the man who had manipulated Teresa. Why, I asked directly. Why target me and my daughter? Hubert shrugged. Because you have what I want, a $500,000 house, an attractive life insurance policy, and a daughter easy to persuade. Actually, you should blame yourself. You abandoned Teresa, letting her wander and crave love. I just stepped into that gap. His words stabbed at my heart, but I stayed calm. The recorder under my button was still running. I saw you slip poison into the soup, I said slowly. Hubert laughed harshly. You're smarter than I thought. But unfortunately, Teresa still chose me. You're just the last obstacle. Once you're gone, everything will be perfect. I took a sip of coffee, eyes fixed on him, perfect. He forgot there are fathers who'd rather die than let someone kill them silently. He narrowed his eyes, voice low. Don't test me, Mr. Brown. Next time, it won't just be white powder in the soup. Leaving the cafe, I walked into the cold wind, my heart torn. On one hand, I had enough recorded evidence. On the other, I clearly saw the danger. Hubert wasn't bluffing. He's used to using others as tools, and Teresa is just the latest victim. Back home, I opened my notebook and wrote another line. February 16th. Hubert, polished appearance, smooth talker, but a predator. He knows the weak spot, fatherly love. I closed the notebook and looked around the dark house. In the shadows, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Hubert has revealed himself, and this battle has entered a new phase. That night, I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the silent street. The dim yellow streetlight cast faint streaks of light. A gust of wind blew, sending the threatening envelope on the table fluttering to the floor. I bent down to pick it up, reading the words again. This is your last chance, I whispered. No, Hubert, this is just the beginning. Outside, the city was silent, but I knew the figure behind it all was clear now. And this time, I won't let him get away. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd carried a boulder all night long. The meeting with Hubert was still haunting my mind. His smooth voice, cold smile, the eyes of a hunter, all of it felt like a blade hanging over my head. I sat at the table and reopened my notebook. The latest page read, Hubert revealed himself. Next trap, catching him in the act. I knew there was only one way to expose him and Teresa to the light. But before I could do that, I needed to force him to make a mistake right in front of me. That afternoon, Teresa showed up unexpectedly. She didn't knock, just walked in like she still owned the place. Her face was gone, but her eyes held something different, a stubborn defiance. "Dad," she said, "Hubert wants to see you again." "Tonight," I replied calmly. "For what this time? Isn't he satisfied with just threatening me?" Teresa pressed her lips, avoiding my gaze. "He just wants a peaceful end. If you sign the papers, no one will get hurt," I sneered, my dry laugh echoing in the room. "A peaceful end? Teresa, do you even understand what you're saying? You keep repeating his words like a cheap tape recorder." She clenched her hands, trembling. "You don't understand. I'm in debt. I have no way out. Hubert is the only one helping me." I gritted my teeth. "Helping? He's turning you into someone who plans to kill his own father. That's what you call help?" In her teary eyes, I saw her struggle, but then she turned away, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, tonight, 8 o'clock. The old warehouse at the end of Harrison Street. If you don't come, they will." She stopped, not finishing the sentence. I nodded. The confrontation I'd been waiting for had arrived. That night, I wore a thick jacket, hiding a small recorder and an old folding knife that had been with me on the battlefield. I didn't want to use violence, but experience taught me that going into a wolf's den meant having something in your hand. The Harrison warehouse was pitch dark, with only a few flickering yellow bulbs hanging from the ceiling. Inside, the smell of dampness and rust hit my nose. I stepped in and saw Teresa standing in a corner while Hubert sat on a metal chair, legs crossed, wearing a half-smile. "Mr. Brown," he spoke like a host greeting a guest. "Thank you for coming. Let's make this quick. Sign the papers, and you can leave here safely." I stared straight at him, each word dropping like stone. "You think I'd hand over my lifetime's property to a con man?" Hubert shrugged, his eyes flashing coldly. "Then things will get ugly." I turned to Teresa, daughter. "You still have a chance. Come to your father. Leave him behind. Don't let him drag you down with him." She trembled, her eyes full of tears, but then Hubert placed his hand on her shoulder. Squeezing lightly, like a command, Teresa bowed her head, not moving toward me. The tense conversation stretched on in the cramped warehouse. I pretended to relent and asked about the documents. Hubert pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase and pushed them toward me. I opened them deliberately, letting the recorder catch every word of his explanation. "This is the property transfer contract. Once you sign, Teresa and I will handle everything." I smiled faintly. "You speak as if I've already agreed." Hubert stepped closer, his face right in front of mine, the smell of cheap cologne mixed with cigarette smoke wafting out. "You have no choice left. Brown, if you don't sign, we will take it by other means. And next time, there won't be any confusion about the soup bowls." His voice rang out clearly. In that moment, I knew I had golden evidence. Just as the tension was stretched tight, the blaring siren of a police car sounded outside the door. Red and blue lights flashed through the cracks in the warehouse. Hubert cursed, eyes wide with panic. "Wiki!" Teresa clutched her head, shouting, "No, no way!" The iron door burst open. 2 officers rushed in, guns drawn, police. "Drop everything!" I stepped back, raising my hands to show I was harmless. Hubert stood frozen, his eyes darting wildly. An officer lunged forward, twisting his arm behind his back and cuffing him. Teresa collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Brown?" The officer turned to me. "We received a tip and evidence from lawyer Emily Carter. Your recording is enough to get an immediate arrest warrant." I sighed deeply, feeling completely drained. The confrontation was over, at least for tonight. On the way back, I looked at Teresa sitting in the police car, her face pale, eyes vacant. Hubert kept snarling curses, promising revenge. I knew the legal battle was far from over, but at this moment, I felt lighter than ever. Returning home, I opened my notebook and wrote a new entry, February 17th. The confrontation Hubert arrested, Teresa caught, but is she still salvageable? Outside, dawn was breaking. I sat still, my hand resting on the fresh ink of the page. The longest night had passed, but the journey to reclaim the truth honor, and a chance to save a lost daughter was far from over. After that night at Harrison's warehouse, I thought I could finally sleep peacefully. But just days later, the truth emerged. The fight wasn't over. It had just entered a new chapter, the chapter of the law, where the real enemy would be unmasked. The city court held an emergency hearing. I arrived early, carrying all the files, recordings, and even the plastic bag with the leftover soup, the small but powerful evidence that could tip the scales. The courtroom was packed, the press jostling, everyone curious about the case of the daughter poisoning her father to seize his assets. Hubert entered first, still looking dapper in a black suit and red tie, but his eyes no longer held confidence. Next to him was Teresa, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, her face gaunt. She didn't dare look at me, just bowed her head, her hands shackled and shining. The prosecutor began, "We have audio evidence showing defendant Hubert Klein and accomplice Teresa Brown conspired to seize assets through poisoning. They prepared fake documents, sent threatening messages, and directly intimidated the victim Simon Brown." I sat silently, each word striking like a hammer on a nail. Hubert tried to smile, but sweat beaded on his forehead. When it was my turn to testify, the room fell silent. I stood up, clutching the file. "I am Simon Brown, Teresa's father. That night, I saw my daughter put white powder into the soup bowl with my own eyes. I switched the bowls, and Teresa was the one who ate it. Afterward, I recorded all her confessions and the meeting with Hubert. I recounted every detail, every timeline, my voice slow but firm. Hubert's defense lawyer tried to interrupt. He could be imagining or fabricating. I played the recording, Hubert's voice echoing, "Next time, there will be no mix-up with the soup bowl." The whole room shook. The judge banged the gavel, "Silence." I looked straight into Hubert's eyes. He avoided my gaze. For the first time, I saw the fear in the once arrogant man. The trial lasted several days. The press covered it extensively, and the public buzzed with gossip. Hubert's long-built scam career was gradually exposed. 3 identity changes, numerous women deceived for love and money, fake investment schemes, even tax evasion charges. Every day, I sat in the courtroom quietly watching his world crumble piece by piece. Witness after witness stepped forward, women with worn faces recounting how Hubert stole their assets and left them drowning in debt. Their tears twisted my heart, but also gave me strength. I was not alone. Teresa sat in the defendant's chair, her face pale as death. Hearing the testimony, she shrank back, as if realizing she was just one of countless victims. On the last day of the trial, Hubert struggled desperately. He stood up, his voice shrill. "Your Honor, I only did what Teresa asked. She was the one who wanted to kill her father to inherit the estate. I just helped." The courtroom erupted in noise. Teresa burst into tears. "No! He forced me. He threatened that if I didn't do it, I would die." The 2 accomplices now turned on each other before the court. Watching that scene, my heart ached and burned with bitterness, a father-son bond eroded by a predator like Hubert. Finally, the judge pronounced the verdict: defendant Hubert Klein, convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and fraud, is sentenced to 15 years in prison. Defendant Teresa Brown, influenced and coerced but voluntarily involved, is sentenced to 6 years in prison, eligible for parole after 4 years with good behavior. The gavel slammed down with a loud echo. Hubert's face drained of all color. Teresa collapsed, tears streaming down her face. As the police led them away, I stood up and walked out into the hallway. The afternoon sunlight poured through the tall glass window, bright, but not enough to chase away the darkness inside me. I had won, or at least justice had. Hubert would go to prison, his criminal career reduced to ashes. But when Teresa looked back at me, her eyes full of pain, my heart ached sharply. She was still my daughter, even if she had lost her way. That evening, I returned to the old house. Sitting in the living room, I took the family photo from the drawer. Margaret smiled gently, and little Teresa sat in her mother's lap. I sighed. "Do you see, Margaret? The enemy has fallen, but we have lost so much, too. I opened the leather journal and wrote February 25th. Hubert collapsed. Teresa sentenced. Justice won, but a father's heart remains cracked. The next day, the press was flooded with headlines. Emotional scammer sentenced. Daughter conspires to poison father. Neighbors looked at me with a mix of pity and respect. But I don't care. I only see one thing clearly: Hubert, who once confidently believed he would have it all, now has nothing but a prison uniform and 4 confining walls. That night, I went out onto the porch and looked up at the sky. A cool breeze blew through, bringing the relief I had been waiting for weeks. Hubert had completely fallen, and with him, all the lies collapsed. But my journey was far from over. I still had to learn how to live on, facing the pain Teresa left behind. I thought after the trial I could finally breathe easy. But life rarely wraps up that neatly. Hubert was imprisoned, Teresa convicted, yet the echoes of their deceit still haunted me. A week later, I received a letter sent from the prison. Sender Hubert Klein. I hesitated, but finally tore open the envelope. Mr. Brown, he wrote in firm handwriting. You think you've won, but you're wrong. I still have people out there. Those who owe me favors won't leave you alone. If you want peace, sell the house and send the money to this account. You have 7 days, no signature, just a bank account number. I let out a bitter laugh. Even in the darkness of his cell, he was still reaching out, still thinking he could manipulate the world. I put the letter into another envelope and immediately handed it to the prosecutor. But inside, I knew Hubert wasn't ready to let go. And I, a father and former soldier, couldn't let him have a chance to strike back again. A decisive blow was needed to end this for good. I began to follow the trail. With the help of lawyer Emily, I met Marcus Sullivan, the private detective who had assisted with the earlier investigation. Marcus brought a thick file. Hubert has a network outside, he said. He owes money to a money laundering gang. That's why he targeted wealthy women to pay off his debts. If you want to completely destroy him, we need proof linking him to that gang. I was stunned. It turned out Teresa was just a pawn in the whole operation. What do we do now? I asked. Marcus smirked. Bait? He still believes he can control you. We'll use that arrogance to make him confess. The plan began. I wrote a reply letter, pretending to be scared. Hubert, I don't want trouble. I'm going to sell the house, but I need guarantees. I want to talk to your people in person to make sure the deal goes smoothly. The letter was sent through a lawyer, ensuring it reached him. 2 days later, I got a strange call. A man's heavy voice. Are you Brown? Hubert said you'd pay. I pretended to tremble. Yes, but I need to meet face to face. They arranged to meet at a suburban bar. That night, Marcus and I arrived early. Hidden cameras, secret microphones, everything was set. 2 tattooed men walked in and sat across from me. One pulled out his phone and played a recording of Hubert's voice from prison. This is the father. He's selling the house. Collect the money. Marcus glanced at me and nodded slightly. The bait took it. I pretended to hesitate, then placed a fake stack of documents on the table. I want to be sure Hubert is really behind this. I don't want to be tricked. The bigger man growled, Don't worry. Klein owes us hundreds of thousands. Once you sell the house, the money will go toward the debt. Simple. Each word was clearly picked up by the microphone. At that moment, the police stormed in. They were handcuffed on the spot, and the fake documents were recorded as evidence. A week later, the press reported, money laundering ring linked to Hubert Klein's fraud scheme dismantled. The evidence from the meeting caused the prison to tighten security and completely cut off Hubert's outside contacts. I returned home and sat in front of my leather-bound journal. I wrote March 4th, the decisive move. Hubert lost all connections. The battle is over. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A huge burden finally lifted from my shoulders. Hubert no longer has power. No allies, no way to reach beyond the bars. Only I remain, the old house, and the unhealed pain over my daughter. A few days later, I received a letter from Teresa in jail. her handwriting shaky. Dad, I don't expect your forgiveness, but thank you for ending him. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a way to survive. I know I betrayed and sinned, but inside, I'm still the child who used to crawl into your arms when the thunder roared. I'm sorry. After reading it, I folded the letter and placed it beside Margaret's photo. I wasn't ready to respond, but at least her words were no longer lies. On the last night of winter, I sat on the porch, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. I closed my eyes, as if I could hear Margaret and Teresa's laughter from when they were little. Those sounds are gone, but the memories remain. Hubert had completely collapsed. And I, with all my pain, delivered the final decisive blow. Not with guns, but with patience, with justice, and with the love of a father who refuses to let evil destroy his family. Moonlight shone down on the porch roof, cold but pure. I looked up and whispered, "It's over, Margaret." I kept my promise. When Hubert's last door closed behind bars, I knew the brutal battle was over. But another battle, quieter and tougher, was still ongoing, the fight to reclaim my dignity after everything that had happened. The first days were really hard. I couldn't step out onto the street without hearing whispers. There, the father poisoned by his own daughter. That Mr. Brown, almost killed by his own blood. Rumors spread faster than the wind, and each time they reached my ears, they left a small scar in my heart. But instead of hiding, I chose to face them. I walked into the familiar grocery store, head held high, greeting everyone. At first, they were awkward, avoiding my gaze. Then gradually, they nodded back. I understood my silence now would mean accepting humiliation. I had to restore my honor myself. I began rewriting the whole story, from the first bowl of soup to the day Hubert was arrested. I didn't write out of bitterness, but with truth, clarity, and decisiveness. I sent that manuscript to a local newspaper. A week later, the article was published. A father uncovers his daughter's poisoning plot, and a lesson on family justice. Reading those words in print, I felt a weight lift off my chest. Not to gain sympathy, but to make them understand I am not a silent victim. I am a living witness to the truth. One evening, Mrs. Patterson, a longtime neighbor, knocked on my door, bringing an apple pie. She smiled kindly. "Mr. Simon, I read the article. You're very brave. Don't think everyone looks at you with judgment. Many people respect you." I was speechless, only able to nod. For the first time in months, I felt warmth from a hand not bound by blood. As for Teresa, I received a few more letters. At first, I left them unopened. But one night, as the wind howled outside the window, I sat down and slowly tore open an envelope. "Dad, I'm attending a rehabilitation class. They're teaching me to take responsibility." Every day, I remember that evening. Remember your disappointed eyes. I know I'll never erase it all. But I hope that one day, you'll believe I truly want to change. I folded the letter away, not replying right away. Forgiveness isn't a gift you can give in a hurry. But at least I saw a small glimmer there. To reclaim my dignity, I also sought to live with purpose. I went to the Veterans Association, volunteering to share my story with elderly people facing the risk of being exploited by their grandchildren. At first, my voice trembled, my eyes blurred when I mentioned Teresa's name. But the more I spoke, the stronger I became. An old man took my hand after the talk. "You saved me." I also suspected my grandson was taking my pension money. Thanks to you, I found the courage to confront him. Those words made me realize dignity isn't about falling or being betrayed, but about how we stand up and defend the truth. Not just for ourselves, but for others too. On a weekend morning, I went to the park near my house. Sunlight filters through the leaves, children laughing loudly. So I sit on a stone bench, holding a cup of hot coffee. A rare feeling of peace seeps into my chest. A stranger young man approaches quietly and says, "You're Mr. Brown, right? I've read about you. You remind me of my father, a man who was strict, but later I understood he just wanted to protect me. Thank you." I nodded, saying nothing. Inside, A warm current flows through me, washing away layers of shame that had clung for so long. That night, I opened the leather-bound notebook again, where I had recorded every piece of evidence, every pain. On the last page I wrote March 20th. Hubert has lost everything. Teresa is in reform. I, Simon Brown, am no longer the poisoned father, but the man who stood up, held on to the truth, and protected his honor. Dignity is not given. It only returns when we dare to face it. I put down the pen and closed the notebook. For the first time, closing that book didn't feel heavy, and its mission was complete. Outside, the spring breeze softly whispered like Margaret's voice years ago. He did the right thing. I lifted my face, letting the moonlight shine into my eyes. Dignity has returned. Not perfect, not complete, but enough for me to live the rest of my life with shoulders straight, with a heart that won't bow to lies. That spring arrived late, but when the first sunlight hit the porch, I knew one chapter had closed. Hubert Klein sits in federal prison, the predator who shattered so many families now confined to 4 cold walls. Teresa, my daughter, is also serving time in a state correctional facility. A 6-year sentence marks her life like a scar, an indelible milestone. As for me, after everything, I still sit in the old house, the place that witnessed both happiness and betrayal. But this time, there's no feeling of shame or bitterness. I've walked the full journey of a father pushed to the edge, from that fateful bowl of soup to standing before the judge, and finally, reclaiming my dignity. After the verdict, I received countless calls, relatives, friends, even strangers I didn't know. A woman from another state sent a letter. Your story gave me the courage to stand up against my son, who stole my retirement money. Thank you. My hands trembled as I read it. I never expected my personal pain to become strength for others. That was when I realized this journey was not just about protecting myself, but also about sending a message that even when blood turns its back, a person still has the right to hold on to truth and dignity. I sold the old house and moved into a small apartment near downtown. There, I volunteered in a program supporting elderly people abused or scammed by their own family members. Every time I shared my story, I saw understanding in their eyes. Many broke down in tears, saying they had also been taken advantage of by their children or grandchildren, but never dared to speak up. An elderly lady held my hand, choking up, "Mr. Brown, you made me feel I'm not alone. I won't stay silent anymore." At those moments, I felt my heart heal a little more. As for Teresa, letters from the prison kept coming regularly. In them, she talked about work in the sewing workshop, ethics classes, and her remorse. At first, I didn't reply. I needed time to tell true regret from mere pleas for pity. Then one day, I received another letter, longer than before Dad. Today, I stood before the rehabilitation group and told my story. I said that out of greed, debt, and weakness. I blindly followed a con artist. I confessed to everyone that I once wanted to poison my own father. Many looked at me with fear, but one person patted my shoulder and said, "You dared to speak out, so you've already come halfway." Dad, I'm not asking for your forgiveness yet, but I hope that one day, when I step out of here, I can call you family again. I read it over and over, tears falling on the page. Forgiveness maybe not yet, but hope had returned. One afternoon, I sat on the porch, a gentle breeze blowing. I closed my eyes and saw the image of Margaret, my wife, smiling kindly. If she were still alive, she would surely be heartbroken to see our daughter lost. But I believe she would also advise me to hold on to love. I opened the notebook and wrote, "Forgiveness isn't about erasing memories, but learning to live on while the scars remain." 3 years later, Teresa was granted a sentence reduction for good behavior. The day she walked out of the prison gates, I was there. Her face was gaunt, her eyes tired, but I saw honesty in her gaze. She walked toward me, stopped a few steps away, and whispered, "Dad, I don't dare to ask for anything. I just want to say I've truly changed. I stayed silent, then held out my hand. She burst into tears and hugged me. In that moment, I didn't forget what she had done, but I no longer saw her as a stranger. I saw the child who used to crawl into my arms on stormy nights. I took Teresa back to the small apartment. We sat at the dining table, sipping chicken soup together. But this time, I was the one who cooked it. As the first spoon touched my lips, I slowly said, "Soup can be poison, or it can be healing. It all depends on the hands and heart of the cook." Teresa nodded, tears in her eyes. In the months that followed, I didn't expect to have a perfect family again. We just took small steps, shopping together, having coffee together, mentioning Margaret without crying. Each step was a victory not over an outside enemy, but over the bitterness within. Looking back now, I realize justice wasn't just in Hubert's sentence, but in reclaiming the right to define who I am. No longer the poisoned father, but the father who chose truth over silence, justice over compromise, dignity, the thing I thought lost when the no-entry sign hung before the wedding finally returned, not given by others, but held on to through my own persistence. On the last night, I wrote the closing line in the leather-bound notebook, "Hubert has fallen. Teresa is taking small steps forward. I, Simon Brown, am still alive, still dignified, and still believe that even in the cruelest betrayal, people can rise, face the truth, and move on." I put down the pen and closed the notebook, this time not in bitterness, but in peace. Outside, the spring breeze gently blew, carrying the scent of a new beginning. I smiled, looked up at the vast sky, and whispered, "Justice has arrived, and dignity, at last, has returned."